Hi. When I was in high school, I was super involved in stage crew. So that's like, building sets, painting drops, basically all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes to like make the show go on. For every show, there would be a lot of mistakes. We would get newcomers who didn't know what they were doing. We would spill buckets of freshly mixed paint, like any number of disastrous things could happen. But for every show, we had this like beautiful drop on opening night. No matter what happened, no matter what went wrong, it all ended up coming together. And I found that really inspiring. As I got older and started taking more like leadership positions in crew, I realized that what was actually happening was that the student heads were coming in during their lunch periods and their free periods and before and after school to fix all the mistakes that we had made the day before. Also that as the new charge artist, I had signed away all of my free time to the same cause. So why am I telling you this? Things don't just get better. They don't just fall into place. It seems really obvious, but like it's something that I kind of forget. Like when things happen, it is almost always because people came together to make it happen. In this country, we've made technological and social advances so massive they would be incomprehensible even 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. But again, this wasn't by happenstance. We didn't just like end up on the moon. Women and people of color didn't just like get the right to vote one day. This happened because of decades of hard work in pursuit of a better world. And in pretty much every case, though these things are generally accepted now, at the time, they were met with some pretty intense backlash. Like at the time that we signed the Declaration of Independence, only 45% of colonists actually considered themselves patriots. There were still hundreds of thousands of loyalists who were like, we don't need to make this big of a change. They called the patriots lawless rebels whose actions have disgraced human nature. We've already got plenty of liberty under the king. You're really gonna send us into anarchy and misery and all the horrors of a civil war just because you don't think we're free enough? Like, why do you need more? Today we have the benefit of hindsight, so we can look at that and go, oh, you silly loyalists. The country could be so much better for everyone in it. You won't let it because you don't want to rock the boat. But like, it makes sense. When you've been conditioned to believe this is the best you can get, anyone who's trying to fight for something better just looks arrogant and overzealous. On a completely unrelated note to any of this, let's talk about the American political and economic systems. There's an old saying that if you're not a liberal by 20, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative by 40, you don't have a brain. Couple things about that. One, I'll have you know I'm neither a liberal nor a conservative, so gotcha. But also I just hate the implication that having a heart and having a brain are mutually exclusive, like that for a decision to be smart, it has to be cruel, that the smartest people are cold and apathetic and don't think about others. Like, you guys realize Rick Sanchez is wrong a lot, right? Like, it's so undeservedly haughty. Like, oh yeah, I make decisions that are bad for people, and that means I'm smart. Okay. The most charitable reading of it is that it's like, oh, as you get older, you'll accumulate wealth and property, and then you'll lean more into the systems that serve to benefit you in that sense. And for the baby boomers, that was true. And then they just kept accumulating property and wealth. They just kept taking it. They just kept taking it. When baby boomers were the same age as today's millennials, they held about 21% of the country's wealth. Today, they hold 53%. Millennials hold just over 4%. How did this happen? For decades, American industry has been built on one idea, and that is to make the most profit possible for the people who own the businesses. Now, participation in the free market, using competition to breed innovation to improve our goods and services to keep making our lives easier, that's the heart of the American dream, baby. But here's the thing. Our idea of a free market is not free. It's just the nature of markets that they favor people with more money. So a proper free market that gives everyone a fair shot has to have measures in place to boost up the little guy, because like the idea is that we have A to B. If you succeed, then you get money. But there are people who already have money, and then they just get to succeed because they already have money. So like a truly free market has to have measures in place to boost up the little guy so that like with enough drive, anyone can succeed regardless of how much they start with. And at one time we had those measures, and it was way easier to build a business from the ground up. But in the 80s, nearly all of those measures were cut under the guise of more freedom. The idea is that if you let business owners accumulate wealth, they'll take that and invest it back into their company, which means more jobs, higher wages, more spending, and then more cash flowing through the country, and it's great for the economy. It's not what happened. It's been 40 years since those repeals. The opposite happened. That money didn't go back into the economy, it didn't go into the working man's pockets, it went to the Cayman Islands. And it's staying there. So I go back to that liberal by 20, conservative by 40. How have we settled that the group that consolidates wealth into a smaller and smaller group of people, which tanks the country's economy, How is that the party of brains? And like historically, the party of brains has run on a platform of opposing like every scientific and social advancement this country tries to achieve. Make it make sense.
Well, I mean, someone's gotta keep the progressives in check.
But that's not policy. Like, what policies do you want that aren't just getting in the way of the opposition?
Look, we can't just let the libs have unfettered power or they'll run off with it.
Okay, I think I get it. So you want an institution in place
That will stymie other groups so they don't
overstep their limits.
I just want measures in place so that groups that are only working in their own self-interest can't put the American people at risk for their own personal gain.
Okay, I think I get it. So like, regulations on oil companies to reduce emissions that are depleting the ozone and causing climate change.
No, it's more of a fiscal thing.
Okay, fiscal. So like capital gains taxes on billionaires because they're hoarding wealth is a massive drain on the economy?
No, we're just fighting against mindsets that promote hate and division.
Like white supremacy?
No, like critical race theory.
Okay, so another thing. Fiscal conservatism, minarchies, austerity. When you look at the numbers, these systems just work directly against the best interests of most of the people in this country. So you can't sell conservatism on the actual function of its economic policies because no one's gonna vote for that. So you have to capitalize on this like untapped inner rage that a lot of people have. Have you ever noticed that every few years there's some new phenomenon that's gonna tear apart the very fabric of American society?
This war on Christmas is a part of a larger war on Christianity.
Critical race theory is so unbelievably dangerous, it'll disintegrate this country without us ever realizing it.
Think of something you love that brings you a sense of peace and decency, and they will somehow link it to the patriarchy.
Mr. Potato Head now apparently has to go buy Potato X.
Prices are going through the roof and grocery shelves are empty, and every time you fill up your gas tank, you nearly go bankrupt.
Do we get to a point where human warmth, and romance are illegal?
If you don't do what they tell you to do, they're gonna come after you. Every one of your young people is learning this, by the way.
It's the same tired routines. Social distancing is communism, just like race mixing is communism. We're being overtaken by cultural Marxists when we used to be overtaken by cultural Bolshevists. It's the same thing. And now that we've ramped up all this fear, we don't even have to sell them on fiscal policy. We just talk about the culture war, and they'll come along for these economic practices that will almost certainly make their lives worse. This is not the party of the working class, no matter how much they try to sell it that way. No matter how much Tucker Carlson tries to sell it that way. And wow, I could make a whole video on that man alone. Tell me if you want to see that. I don't know if that's something people are interested in, but it is absolutely something I could do. The fiscal conservative approach is based around this idea of like personal responsibility, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the government shouldn't be intervening to help you, all that kind of stuff. And the issue with this approach isn't even that it's like cold and self-involved, though that is an issue, but it's that this lack of consideration for other people is seen as smart and rational when it just objectively worsens the economy. We hate welfare in this country. We don't want to use the economy to give freebies to people that didn't earn it. But the fact of the matter is that the chronically poor and homeless are terrible for the economy. Without stable housing or a stable income, these people are going in and out of emergency rooms, hospitals, psych wards, rehab centers, and prisons, and this is costing the American taxpayers $30,000 to $50,000 a year. That is literally halved when you just give them a damn house. But people don't want handouts. They won't understand the value of something unless they earned it. That is just not true. That's just not true. We get antsy about any sort of government intervention because people should be able to choose how they use their money, as if billionaires becoming centimillionaires is more restrictive than the 40% of people who would not be able to afford a $400 emergency out of pocket. Did you know? Fun fact. The federal minimum wage is officially not enough to cover the cost of living for a single full-time worker in any state in the US. But we can't raise the minimum wage or we'll have inflation, except that's not how that works. We already had inflation and we continue to have inflation. That's why wages can't cover the cost of living anymore. And it's like, the free market's great. We love markets. I'm not a frickin' pinko. Wait, is that, I don't know how offensive that is. Market forces are great. I'm not a frickin' pinko. But there are certain areas, transportation, healthcare, housing, these are inelastic. They don't respond to market forces. The way the market is supposed to work is that the seller sells something for the most a buyer will pay for it. And if they're charging too much for it, then the buyer doesn't buy it and they're like, okay, we have to bring our prices down. But when it comes to things like housing and transportation and healthcare, you can't just like opt out of those things. So they can charge whatever they want for it. And hey, that's That's not cool. And then we're left with the system where people cannot afford to live on minimum wage, and then business owners get mad that people don't want to spend 30 hours of their week every week, not even getting enough money to cover all their expenses. Like, that's your supply-demand curve, sweaty. Don't you know anything about economics? It's just like, thanks to automation, we are becoming more and more productive with less and less human labor. If we were to start using clean, renewable energy, we would improve health conditions for millions of people in this country. This is utopian stuff. Except it's not. It's actually a nightmare because we don't have social safety nets in place for people who worked in those industries. So they're just gonna be without a job, and without a job, you die. This system is not compatible with innovation. Coal mining is an incredibly dangerous job. Regular exposure to dust seriously increases your risk of a bunch of different lung and throat diseases. It would be objectively better for coal miners to not mine coal if they don't have to, but there's not a plan B for them. If we replace coal with renewable energy, then we've got thousands of families that have just lost their primary source of income. And we look at that and we could say, all right, how are we gonna make sure that these families are able to survive without coal mining? But instead we go, no, we just have to keep mining coal. We can't stop mining coal. Let's just keep doing the thing that's worse for everyone because helping people out, that's communism. And like, it's one of those things with historical precedents. When we outlawed child labor, a lot of families lost a lot of income, but quality of life improved immensely. That's why I'm so over this like fiscally conservative, socially progressive idea. The most charitable interpretation of that label is that you're lying and you're actually socially conservative too, because the alternative is that you genuinely are fiscally conservative and socially progressive. So you see all of the problems, but then when it comes to the root of those problems, whatever, I just like gay marriage and weed. There are already like 15 different directions this video could go in, and I'm ready to make it into a whole series. I have so much that I want to talk about. It's been almost a year. Here's my point. If history is any guide, and it's always a guide, our quality of life is insanely low for our position as a nation. We're the only developed country that doesn't provide its citizens healthcare, but we spend twice as much as the OECD average on healthcare, and we get statistically worse outcomes. We're literally spending more to get less. That's not American. We want to run this country like a business rather than a country, which means that we prioritize short-term gains over long-term ones, which is why we have had 3 once-in-a-lifetime recessions over the course of my arguably pretty short lifetime. All right, Cameron, you've been yelling for a while. What do you want me to do about it? Wake up, sheeple! Wait, I don't want to clap. Wait, where's the... Wake up, sheeple! This country is probably the most socially progressive it's been ever, but there is still so much hateful disinformation being spread under the guise of fiscal concerns. It's fun to view the progression of American society as just like a steady trend up, but that's not how it goes. Like, everyone talks about Martin Luther King now, like, you know, we should be doing what he did, not ruffling any feathers. Like, the FBI was trying to get him to kill himself. He literally was assassinated. So I guess I'm asking that you check in with the people around you, especially if they're like, you know, people whose issues ostensibly only involve the economy. Because for years, conservative pundits, oh my god, I could make a whole video about this too, but they've been using the pitfalls, the economic pitfalls of their party to justify a whole bunch of other crazy shit. And like, it's hard because I've talked about this in the past, especially with like online politics. People don't understand how to like communicate their political beliefs to people who don't agree with them. There are a lot of people, they're willing to see the light if you don't shine it right in their eyes. Like, oh god, oh my god, please. Really, it feels like there are people online who have never even entertained the concept of touching grass, and they're like trying to school people on economic policy. But look, there are lots of conspiracy theories flying around about authoritarian dictatorships and puppet governments, and some are more believable than others. But I'll tell you one thing for sure. The masses are easiest to control when they're dumb and poor. So if there is a group to be suspicious of, I'd argue that it's the group that's constantly cutting funding for public education and trying to privatize the whole system, which makes it less accessible to lower income students, at the same time as they're taking measures to cut economic mobility and just like cripple poor people's finances so that they can't get out of poverty. Sounds to me like a cycle of poor, uneducated masses. Here's the real trick. You reframe your ideology a little bit. Instead of saying, my ideas should be the best ones, say, the best ideas should be mine. Like me, I like politics, I like being right. So when I'm faced with the idea that my politics might not be right, I'm given a choice. I can either dig in my heels and insist that it's what I know and it's gotta be right, or I can just say, if I wanna be right, why don't I just start saying the right thing? I urge you and the people around you to choose the second one. A lot of my opinions have changed drastically since I first got into politics, and it's not because I'm fickle or stupid, it's because I'm open to changing my mind. I'm open to hearing new ideas and seeing how they stack up against the ones I already have. You could say I'm a liberal, but please don't, I'm not a liberal. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. I hope I gave you something to think about. Now it's your turn to talk, except I'm also gonna keep talking. Let's see, what have I been listening to lately? Listening to a lot of classical music because I'm composing again. Excess by Rina Sawayama and the whole album Sawayama. I really like. Was shown to me by my friend Erin, aka It's Electra on Twitch. Go subscribe to her because she's cool. Oh, I make stickers, and one of the stickers that I make is custom Spotify codes, and when people order that sticker, I like to listen to whatever they requested on there. And this album, Flying by Cody Fry, is really good. I did not watch American Idol. I do not care. But I really like this album. Oh, but the point of all that is that now you tell me what music you've been listening to. We are now at 20 minutes till, so we're supposed to be there actually, which means I should probably get ready. Bye!